you may be wondering to yourself why we went from 9.5 to 9.8. This is not all of 9.8, but I want to use one of the techniques from 9.8 before we move on to 9.6, because I think that this technique makes what we're learning in 9.6 much easier. So yeah, here we go. We're going to learn how to factor by grouping. You always factor by grouping when you have 4 terms. Okay, up to this point we've been dealing with 2 terms or 3 terms. To factor by grouping, you have 4 terms. So this is when you have 4 terms. Okay? And this is all greatest common factoring. Okay, so when we group these things, we're going to be pulling out greatest common factors, and then we'll be pulling out another greatest common factor, and then we'll be done. Okay, so it's using exactly what we know how to do to solve a bigger problem. Okay? So here we have x cubed minus 4x squared plus 3x minus 12. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to group this with the first 2, we're going to group them, and then the last 2. It does not matter how you group them. It's always easier to just go how the problem is presented, but if you do it right, you'll get the same answer no matter how you group. So don't let how you group it worry you, okay? So if we just group our first 2 and our last 2, what we're going to do is we're going to look for greatest common factors. Okay, so x cubed is x times x times x, and 4x squared is 2 times 2 times x times x. Okay? Our greatest, and in order to do this, you have to pull out the greatest common factor. If you don't pull out the greatest, it's not going to work. Okay, so here they both share 2 x's. So I wrote this in different colors so that we could see what's going on. So I pull out an x squared, and then I have an x left over minus 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay? Over here, I have 3 times x, and 12 is 2 times 2 times 3. Okay, so we are sharing a 3 here. So I pull out the 3, and my leftovers are an x and a minus 4. Okay, so now you have this x squared times x minus 4 plus 3 times x minus 4. So we have these 2 products that are happening right here. Okay, so since things are still being multiplied together, we want to look for common factors again that we can pull out. So you want to view x squared as a factor and x minus 4 as a factor. And then we have 3 and x minus 4. If you look at it this way, x minus 4 is a common factor that both this term and this term have in common. So then we can pull out the x minus 4. Just like up here, how they shared the x squared, so we pulled it out. See, I'm using blue for our greatest common factors. So here they shared an x squared, so we pulled it out. Here they share an x minus 4, so we can pull that out as the greatest common factor. And then we write what's left over. So we have an x squared left over in this first term, which ends up there, and then a 3. And then we're done. Okay? So we'll do 3 more examples just to get the idea down. Okay? So here we have x cubed plus 5x squared minus 2x minus 10. Okay, here we're going to group again, factor by grouping. We're grouping our first 2 terms and grouping our last 2 terms. X cubed is x times x times x, and we have 5x squared. We are sharing 2 x's, and we have to pull out the greatest. So here we have an x squared on the outside, and then left over, we're going to have an x and a plus 5. Okay? Over here, we have a negative 1 times 2 times x, and we have a negative 1 times 5 times 2. Okay, both of these are sharing a negative 1 and, and a 2. Okay, so we're going to pull out a negative 2, and then left over is x plus 5. Now, you might be asking, how did I know to pull out a negative 2 instead of just a 2? Okay, the reason being is that in order for factoring by grouping to work, we want whatever is in the parentheses to be the same. Okay? If I had just pulled out a 2, so say I were pulling out a positive 2, that would have left me with a negative x minus 5. In which case, these 2 things are no longer the same, so that I couldn't continue in this process. Okay, so the idea here is that you want to set it up so that whatever is in your parentheses is the same thing. Okay, so that being the case, that is why we pull out a negative 2. And then we're left over with an x plus 5. Okay? Because now we see that these two things share this x plus 5, so we can pull out our x plus 5, and then our leftovers are x squared minus 2. Okay? That is factoring by grouping. Let's do a couple more. And the more you practice it, the better you'll get at it, but yeah. Okay, so here we have 4 terms again. Let's go ahead and group. First 2, last 2. Okay, we have a 3a and x, which means this has a 3 times a times x, and this 15 has a 3 times 5 times a. The most that these two share are a 3 and an a. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out my 3a as my greatest common factor, and then my leftovers are x, and I have a minus 5. Okay? Now, if you look here, we already have what's happening to be the same. So if we just leave this plus x minus 5, okay, we're good to go. So what did these two share? They share an x minus 5 in common. So we're going to pull out an x minus 5. And then our leftovers are 3a plus what? We have to put something here, because this just didn't come from a 0. If we put a 0 there, that wouldn't work. So what are we doing? Remember, we have to understand that there's an understood 1 outside there. So this is 3a plus 1. And that is our answer. Okay? And our last example, here if we group our first 2 again, group our last 2 again, 8 is 2 times 4, which is 2 times 2 times 2, times y times z, and 6 is 2 times 3 times z. These guys both share a z, and they share 2. So I'm going to pull out a 2z, and then my leftovers, 2 times 2 times y is 4y minus 3. Okay, now, since our goal is for these two parentheses to be the same, I want you to look and see what's happening. Here I have a positive term with a y. Here I have a negative term with a y. Here I have a negative term with a number, and I have a positive term with a number. Okay, since my signs are opposite on both counts, that tells me right away that I'm going to need to pull out something that is negative. Okay, so we want our signs to be the same so that we can use this process. So since it's positive, negative, we're going to need to pull out that negative so that our signs will align. Okay? So not only are we going to pull out a negative, but what else do we share? 12 is 3 times 4, which is 3 times 2 times 2 times y, and 9 is 3 times 3. So these are sharing a 3. So I'm going to pull out a negative 3, and then left over 2 times 2 times y is 4y minus, okay, a 3. Remember, this might be a little confusing, but remember whenever we are factoring, whenever we're putting out that greatest common factor, we're undoing the distributive property. And the distributive property is multiplication, which means that when we pull out a greatest common factor, we're actually using division. Okay, so here, when we're pulling out a negative 3, we're actually saying, let me divide each term by negative 3, and then write what I get here. So negative 12 divided by negative 3 is 4, and y divided by that is y. Here I have a positive 9 divided by negative 3, which gives me this negative 3 here. Okay? So from here, our greatest common factor is 4y minus 3, and then our leftovers our 2z minus 3. Okay? That is factoring by grouping. The more you practice, the easier it will become. Okay?